Is a capital city something that you would consider to have a lot of space and access to a lot of cool stuff at a low price? With inflation burning a hole in everybody's pocket, people are now downsizing like crazy. So the bigger the homes are, the more they're selling them and moving into smaller homes. If you look at some of the major cities, and by that I mean over cities over 1 million people, they generally are having those large 5 bedroom homes are dropping. In my case, in the city where I live, we're losing 20, 30, 40% on some of these properties. But guess what? At the same time, those 1 and 2 bedroom homes now are going up in value. So remember, there is not one market. They are all different, whether you're commercial or whatever, but we're seeing this massive downsizing. What happens if you are in a 2 bedroom or a 1 bedroom and then cannot afford it? People are now looking to relocate. So this really interesting study came out saying where to relocate, but I'm going to give you some little ideas to think about when you're going to be doing this. Let's check this out. This article right here, the Ontario city was named as one of the world's cheapest to relocate to. Now, I challenge you, when is the last time that you saw Ontario and cheapest in the same sentence? So this is Ottawa. If you guys are not familiar, this is the capital of Canada. This is Parliament down here. We also have the Supreme Court over here, and this is the French part of Canada across the river and the English part on this side. But you can see that there's not that many buildings here, and then it kind of gets flat immediately. So it's not like tons and tons and tons of people. But let's go on. I wanted to show you what the city kind of looked like. This is Landlords Insurance, a UK-based insurance company, and they said that this Canadian city was one of the world's cheapest to relocate to. Now, I had to look at that because cheapest and Ontario never go together. Now, Ontario, Ottawa, is the third cheapest. Ottawa is a beautiful place, has a lot of history, but they are looking at this. It's the average price to buy a home is $7,000 per square meter. They do that different. They don't do square feet like we do in Canada here. Even though we're metric, we still have some of that influence from the United States where we do everything by square feet. But take a look at some of these prices. In Greece, not surprised that Greece is pretty cheap. Brussels, I've been there, one of the most boring places I've ever been to in my life. There's nothing there. So they're head of the EU, and what else are they are? They're head of a couple things like international court, but that's it. There's nothing else for a regular human to see. Ottawa, it has a couple things there. Canberra, not really surprised. You know, they were fighting between where to put the capital of Australia, and they had Brisbane's up north and Melbourne down, and they were trying to decide between Melbourne and Sydney. And they were like, if no one can agree, we'll just put a dot in the middle and we'll just try and find some brush around there that we can clear out and put the capital there. So there's nothing really there either in Canberra. And Rome, I'm surprised to see Rome up there. Moscow, very, very shocked to see Moscow. Moscow has the highest number of millionaires and billionaires for that city because it's the only city in Russia that any rich people would go to. I'm very not surprised to see the United States have Washington there. So the only places, right, for Canada and United States are capital cities. And you have to wonder, how come? Why is it cheap to live in Ottawa? Here's a funny thing. I always tell people that Ottawa is Canada's version of communism in a way, or socialism, because in Ottawa, it's like its own little bubble. In Ottawa, it's very similar to Washington, but not near on the same scale at all. But in Ottawa, for example, everybody makes between 50,000 and 120. Almost everybody. They almost all work for the government. Every wing of the government is there. Everybody works for the government, and everyone makes within that salary band. But if you were going to do really, really well and make a lot of money and have a good business, you wouldn't want to be there. Tiny little airplanes flying in and out. No concerts ever come there. So they have a sports team. But what is there? That's my point. Everybody who can make it past that threshold of that salary band now leaves for Toronto or Montreal. And so that makes Ottawa this artificially weird created place. Now, this is the exact same if we're talking about Washington, D.C. or other places, because the majority of people work for the government. Their jobs are very, very, very stable. But think about that. If you wanted to open up a dry cleaner, that category of people, they're not losing their jobs. Come hell or high water, you know, economies up and down, they always are going to be doing their dry cleaning. And so we have a lot of family that lives in Ottawa, And it doesn't matter if you're running a gym or if you're running a car center, the same number of cars are selling. Like, people are not making cuts because to them, there is no recession. Their jobs are always safe and they're always working. So in that case, Ottawa is very different from a lot of other cities that are in Canada. Washington is very different from the rest of the Canada and the States. Depending on what kind of job that you're going to open, you might want to look at some of these capital cities. Now, let's talk about Ottawa, for example. I'm Canadian. If you look at Ottawa, their airport is nicer than what it kind of should be for their size because they have a lot of international diplomats that are coming in. They have to look good. If you look at their border services, they have more people that are there, very short lines to get in. There's not as many planes, but they got to make sure the diplomats are coming in. As far as doctors and hospitals, usually they have really good hospitals in capital cities because they have a lot of politicians that are there. And so if you go through that in your mind, maybe concerts aren't your thing. Maybe living in a big city in Canada, if we're talking about Vancouver or Toronto, in the States, if you're San Francisco or New York or something, that is really, really, really expensive to live. But capital cities are kind of like a life hack. You can get some of the largest homes for the price. So if we go back to that article that they were showing us, this article shows us that it's not only the third cheapest place, Canada, Ottawa, third cheapest. If we head down to the size, Canada is also the fourth in largest properties at 181 square meters. So when you take a look at that, you can have a very large house for a very reasonable price and some of the world's cheapest cities to relocate to. They do have a lot of national museums and so forth in capital cities. I mean, Washington is incredible. Ottawa is incredible, has a lot of the national museums. So there are some really, really fun things. That is why I think that if you were thinking of moving, I would want to put some of the capital cities on your list. I'm a real big history buff myself, and a lot of the history of these countries happens right in those capital cities. So it might not be your flavor, and it might be your flavor. I don't know. You kind of get a lot for not very much. And if you're opening a business in these cities, remember the majority of people work for the government and stable jobs, stable income. If you think of how much they make like 50,000 to 120,000, and it really depends. Obviously, in the United States, they make more money. There's a lot more lobbyists that are around. But if you're trying to open a business that is going to be inflation proof and bulletproof, if you're going after luxury goods in a capital city, you're probably out of your depth. That's not going to be where it's going to go. You're going to have to go to a place like Toronto or New York or something to sell your luxury goods. But what if you're middle class or a little bit better? Upper middle class type stuff. That is your target demographic, and it never goes away. So come recession or no recession, you're going to be safe. So I'm wondering, is a capital city something that you would consider to have a lot of space and access to a lot of cool stuff at a low price? I think it's worth it. Let me know in the comments if you think it's worth it. If this helps you at all, please consider subscribing and maybe sending a friend and letting them know that maybe they should come watch it too. Thanks so much for sticking around. If you like that video, you might like this one and maybe something like that.